So we live in an ever more disconnected world as technology claims to connect us across the globe. And we kind of put on this topic because we've seen it come up on social media a lot, which is how, as a team leader, do you build trust in your team when you might have people working remotely or hybrid? How do you do that? So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. Hopefully that will be useful. So Nadia, what was it that prompted you with this topic? Because I know this was a particular topic you were interested in.
Yeah, I think what's really striking is that since COVID, obviously Zoom as a company has
Mm,
grown massively, and it's more socially and also corporately accepted to have your meetings online. People work more flexible, more from home or other places of the world. Also, really truly global teams. It's
yeah,
a big opportunity for companies to tap into the talent they need, regardless of where they're at. And then yet there is this, and I'm not sure, and maybe we can unpack that, is this bias around that, meeting virtually is different from face to face. Well, we can all agree on that, but
yeah,
that it's better, worse, I don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting you talk about bias there because, of course, there is still a bias that you have to physically be in the same space to create that trust, which is interesting because we had that experience of COVID, as you mentioned, where we were forced into a situation where we had to create trust quickly using the technology. So there's definitely some bias going on somewhere around thinking that, because if you think about organizations at the moment wanting people to go back into the office and they're claiming all sorts of things which maybe aren't backed up by the evidence. So as a team leader, it must be really confusing because you've got so much coming at you in terms of, oh, we need to get people face to face. Yeah, actually, as we know, you can create as much trust online as you can face to face. So yeah, so that's kind of what comes up for me around that bias question and the evidence that points against that bias.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think because this was one of the questions that came up through what people are struggling with, both
Mm,
team members as well as team
mm,
leaders. So team members lack that connection with their direct team, also with their team leader, and team leaders feel they don't have the control necessarily of their team to
yeah.
get the work done. And so while you were talking, this bias is really sort of what's resonating in my head because are we not maybe hiding behind the fact that we work now virtually, but
Mm,
that some of those issues in terms of trust building on how we collaborate, how we bring the team together, how we, get to a high performing team, has that got actually anything to do with how we're connecting either through technology or face to
mm,
face? I'm wondering whether some
mm.
of those issues regarding trust we're not there in the first place, and now we have a scapegoat, so to say, in terms of doing meetings virtually, where it's easily for us to say, well, that must be the issue because it's maybe more universally accepted because it is
Yeah.
something new and people are adapting to it. But from what I've seen is that there's not many, and especially in the coaching world, because sometimes, we work with constellations, for instance, which is a very tangible way of coaching. You can use objects or, drawing or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen it work online. So that makes me think
Mm,
whether it's not really part of our bias that virtually would be more challenging than face to face.
yeah. I think, it's really interesting because at the start of my coaching career back in the early 2000s, without exception, as I was learning coaching skills, all of my coaching clients were telephone clients. So I coached people I had never met. If they passed me in the street, I wouldn't know who they were. And that ability to create trust from the get-go was really important. And for me, the intimacy of having the telephone near your ear and knowing that they had the telephone near their ear, you could hear them breathing, you could almost hear them thinking. You did feel very connected, and you use that word connected. And so I think there's an element of disconnect in the virtual world that it's potentially, or maybe team leaders think it's easier to connect with people in the real world because you're physically in the room with them. And so that being more deliberate about how you connect does require more effort. If you're the team leader, it definitely requires more effort. And then that's other C word that you talked about as well, which is control. And I think there is definitely something around that. If I can't see people, how will I know that they're doing what they're meant to do? And again, let's just check that bias because if I think back to when I led my team in corporate life, often I wouldn't see my team. They would just crack on and do their work, and I had to trust that they were doing what they meant to do.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating. So let's dive into those two words a little bit deeper,
Hmm.
control and connection. So does the virtual space prevent you to have the type of connection that will then satisfy your need for control? Is that kind of like how we're unpacking it?
I'm not sure they are connected, for want of a better word. I think there's two pieces. I think there's for me, and you can say whether you disagree with this, but that connection piece and the connection piece is about how I create a relationship with you. The control piece is about my stuff, my worry, my fear that because I can't physically see you, I don't know what you're doing, and therefore I have to have even more trust in you when I haven't necessarily created that relationship. And if you think back to COVID, people were hired and inducted online, having never been into the office space where they were recruited for. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it in my brain, that they are kind of separate things. There is maybe a little bit of a link, but in my brain, they're two separate things. Because one is about
Yeah, I love
relationship,
that
one is about
how
work.
control is actually about ourselves and how connection is in between people.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Yeah.
Yeah, and so how does then a virtual team different from a face-to-face team, acknowledging that that sense of control lives in ourselves, how to satisfy, because it's really important.
Mm, mm,
Agency, as agency, control, confidence, another C word, they're
yeah,
really
yeah,
important in actually delivering the things you need to do as a team. And then the connection is also really important because you need to rely on that connection. You need to rely on
yeah.
your relational connection with the other person, with the other team members, with your team members. You need to rely on that so that the things get delivered that otherwise would cause your anxiety in terms of not being
Mm,
in control, so to say.
yeah. So I think and we talked about one of my favorite approaches before, and I'm just thinking about as a team leader, how can I use what we're discussing today? And I think the first thing is to notice what's going on and then to name it. So maybe have a conversation with your team in the virtual world, just talking about the things that we've just discussed there and saying, okay, so what are we noticing as the way we work together? What are we noticing about the way we connect with each other? And it is
Beautiful.
really important because that also we know that there is a proximity bias at play. So if people don't see you, you're less likely to get promoted in work. You're less likely to get asked to do, the great work. So we know proximity bias is a thing. So being able to have that conversation with the team and understand how do we as a team want to work with that, knowing what we know about the complexity of using technology as a way that we work together. Because at the end of the day, technology is there as a tool. How might we use it better as a team to help us create that? So yeah, so that would be my
Oh, I love
initial.
that. And I think that we have a fourth C there in terms of context. So
Yes.
it is really depending. So maybe one of the takeaways, or let's try and sum this up and please help me out. But what we've come to realize is that maybe technology as such may not be the issue. It's all about, the context in which you use the technology that creates the connections for you to feel good about the work that's going to be delivered in terms of feeling you're in control, leveraging those connections, and also having the context and the right discussions with your team, in which team coaching can be really, really beneficial to
Mm,
actually uncover some of those biases that we may hold, because in fact, they may not have anything to do with what technology you adopt.
yeah,
It's all about your own sense of control, the connections that you create within the team, and the context in which your team and you as a team leader operate.
yeah. I couldn't have said it better. Nothing to add. And I guess just bringing into where we want to take the conversation, so how we're using the technology, we were talking about the fact that we want to create maybe a series of how to find out more about, as a team leader, what might you be able to do. So we're thinking that for the next, we might run a series of these little videos where we look at, as a team leader, how might we, whatever the topic is. So again, if there are any questions, comments that you have based on the conversations that we've had so far, and take a look back in some of the old videos to see some of the topics that we've covered, we would love to hear from you. So please drop a comment in the comments below. Drop a like as well to share some love and also help the channel, because unfortunately the algorithms will only put it into your feed if we get likes. And likewise, if you can share it with people who you think might benefit from these conversations, we would be extremely grateful. So this has been another conversation on team coaching with me, Rogarel.
And with me, Nadia, and I'm really happy about this row. I think we're kicking off a series of how-tos. So to really dive into what are some challenges that teams in this day and age with technology, with change that is increasingly exponential, how are teams surviving, and how can we provide some tools through team coaching and help them on their journey?
Yeah, fantastic. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you in the next video.
Bye.
Bye.